The massive Kethver station floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal city. Thousands of aliens from different worlds lived and worked there. The station was so big that it took hours to walk from one end to the other. Bright lights flickered through its many windows, and ships came and went like busy insects around a hive. Deep inside the station, in the lower engineering decks, where most aliens never went, 3 humans worked quietly at their jobs. The air was warm and filled with the constant hum of machines. Pipes and cables ran along the walls like veins in a body, carrying power and life to every part of the station. Jiho Park knelt beside a large power coupling, his hands moving carefully. As he adjusted the connections, sweat dripped from his forehead, but he didn't stop working. He had been doing this job for 2 years, and his fingers knew every bolt and wire by touch. The coupling was old and needed gentle care, like a sick animal that might bite if handled roughly. "How does it look over there?" called Min-Soo Kim from across the room. He was working on the environmental processors, the machines that made sure everyone on the station could breathe clean air. His tools were spread out on the floor around him like a doctor's instruments. Min-Soo was younger than Jiho, but just as skilled. He could hear problems in machines before they showed up on any computer screen. "Almost finished," Jiho replied, wiping his hands on his work clothes. "This old coupling has been acting up all week. I think we need to replace it soon." Near the main control panel, So-Young Lee stood reading numbers and charts on her tablet. Computer. She was the team leader, and it was her job to make sure everything in their section worked perfectly. So-Young was smart and careful, and she never missed a problem. The other engineers on the station, the alien ones, often came to ask her questions when their own machines broke down. "The readings look good," she said, making notes on her tablet. "But Jiho is right about that coupling. We should order a new one before it fails completely." The 3 humans had not always worked together. They came from different parts of Earth and had different backgrounds. Jiho grew up in a family of mechanics and learned to fix things before he could read. Min-Soo studied engineering in college, but learned more from working with his hands than from any book. So-Young started as a computer programmer, but discovered she loved understanding how machines worked together. What brought them to this alien station, far from Earth, was simple. They were very good at their jobs. The Veltar, the aliens who controlled this part of space, usually did not like humans. They thought humans were messy and unpredictable. But even the proud Veltar had to admit that human engineers could fix things that no one else could fix. The work was not easy. The station's systems were old and complicated. The original builders had used technology that even the Veltar did not fully understand anymore. But somehow, the humans could make it all work. They had a way of seeing patterns that others missed, of understanding how different parts of the station talked to each other. Jiho finished his work on the power coupling and stood up, stretching his back. "There," he said with satisfaction. "That should hold for another few weeks." But as he spoke, alarms suddenly began ringing throughout the station. Red lights flashed on every wall, and computer screens filled with warning messages. The main reactor, the giant machine that powered the entire station, was having problems. "What happened?" So-Young asked, her fingers flying over her tablet as she tried to understand the emergency signals. "The main power coupling just failed," Min reported, his face pale as he read his instruments. "The same type we were just working on, but in the reactor room." Before any of them could move, the doors to their work area burst open. Veltar security guards rushed in, their weapons drawn and their eyes angry. The Veltar looked like giant insects, with hard shells and clicking mouths. When they were angry, like now, they made frightening noises with their mandibles. "Step away from the controls," the lead guard shouted. "You are under arrest." "What?" So-Young stepped forward, confusion and worry on her face. "What are we arrested for? We were just working on the environmental systems." "Sabotage," the guard replied coldly. "You damaged the main reactor. You will come with us now." Jiho tried to explain. We never went near the main reactor today. We were working on completely different systems. But the guards did not want to listen. They grabbed the 3 humans roughly and put metal restraints on their wrists. Soyoung's tablet fell to the floor and broke. Minsu's tools were scattered as the guards pushed him toward the door. This is wrong, Jiho said, as they were forced to walk through the station's corridors. Other workers, both alien and the few humans, stopped to stare as the security guards marched them past. We did not do anything wrong. The guards took them to the station's prison, a place deep in the center, where no light from outside could reach. The cells were small and cold, designed to hold the worst criminals. Each human was put in a separate cell, unable to see or talk to the others. As the heavy doors closed with a final click, Jiho sat on the hard bench and wondered what would happen to them. Somewhere above, he knew the station's systems were probably already starting to have problems without their care. But now there was nothing they could do except wait and hope that someone would believe they were innocent. The problems started small, like tiny cracks in a dam that nobody noticed at first. 6 hours after the human engineers were locked away, a worker in Sector 7 complained that the air tasted strange. Then another worker said the same thing. Soon, people were coughing and feeling dizzy. Station engineer Vexmar received the first emergency call while he was trying to eat his dinner. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the environmental control room. Sir, we have a problem with the air processors in Sector 7. The oxygen levels are dropping. Vexmar dropped his food and ran to the control room. The screens showed numbers that made his stomach feel sick. The air in Sector 7 had too little oxygen and too much carbon dioxide. If this continued, people could die. Fix it, he ordered the Veltar technicians on duty. But they stared at the control panel with confused expressions. The machine looked the same as always, but now it showed error messages they had never seen before. They pushed buttons and turned dials, but nothing worked. The air kept getting worse. Where are the repair procedures? Asked one technician. The humans always handled this. Another replied quietly. Before Vexmar could respond, his communicator buzzed again. This time it was the residential quarters. Sir, we have people floating in the hallways. The artificial gravity is not working, right? Vexmar ran to the residential section and found chaos. The gravity generators were turning on and off randomly. One moment, people walked normally. The next moment, they floated toward the ceiling like balloons. Children cried as they bumped into walls. An elderly alien broke his arm when he fell. During a gravity shift, the Veltar repair team stood around the gravity controls, looking lost and helpless. The human engineers had maintained these systems for so long that nobody else knew how they really worked. How did the humans fix this? Vexmar demanded. We don't know, admitted the senior technician. They never wrote down what they did. We thought it was just basic maintenance. More emergency calls came in. The main communication system started making loud static noises. Ships trying to dock at the station could not hear the control tower's instructions. The food storage units began having temperature problems. The water recycling plants started producing water that smelled bad. Vex single quotes Mar ran from one crisis to another, but his teams could not fix anything. Every system the humans had maintained was now breaking down. It was like the station was slowly dying without them. Junior engineer Kolseth stood in front of a diagnostic screen, his mandibles clicking with frustration. The screen showed a complex pattern of red warning lights and error codes. I don't understand this, he said to Vexmar. The humans made this look so easy. That's because they were not just fixing things, Vexmar realized with growing horror. They were keeping everything connected and balanced. We thought they were just mechanics, but they were conducting an orchestra. The truth hit him like a physical blow. For months, the 3 humans had been performing what could only be called miracles. They had kept ancient, incompatible systems, working together through pure skill and intuition. They had prevented hundreds of small problems from becoming big disasters. They had been the invisible foundation that held the entire station together, and now they were gone. Far away from Kethver Station, a human starship called the Resilience traveled through the darkness between stars. Captain Yoonji Han sat in her command chair, reading reports from her crew. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair, but when she was angry, even the largest aliens respected her. Her communications officer approached with a worried expression. "Captain, we have an emergency message from the Centauri sector." The message appeared on the main screen, and Captain Han's face became very still as she read it. 3 human engineers had been arrested and charged with sabotage. They were being held in maximum security prison. The charges were false, but the aliens would not listen. Captain Han had known something like this might happen. The Veltar were proud and suspicious of humans. They used human skills but did not want to admit they needed human help. Now their pride had made them do something stupid and dangerous. "Change our course," she ordered her navigation officer. "Set heading for Kethver Station. Maximum speed." "That will take us 2 days at full speed," the officer replied. "Then we go full speed," Captain Han said firmly. "And send a message to Earth Command immediately." She walked to her private office and composed a message on her computer. Her words were simple, but carried the weight of controlled anger. 3 human engineers wrongfully imprisoned. Station systems failing. Recommend immediate diplomatic intervention, with full support authorization. The message traveled faster than light through space, reaching Earth in minutes. The response came back just as quickly. "Authorization granted. Show them what happens when they cage our people." Captain Han smiled, but it was not a happy smile. The Veltar thought they could treat humans like disposable tools. They thought they could arrest human workers, and nothing would happen. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As her ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward the failing station, Captain Han began planning exactly how she would make the aliens understand their mistake. The 3 imprisoned engineers were not just mechanics. They were human citizens, and Earth protected its people. The Veltar would learn this lesson, whether they wanted to or not. The human starship Resilience appeared out of nowhere, like a ghost materializing from the void. One moment the space around Kethver Station was empty, and the next moment a sleek silver vessel hung motionless against the stars. The ship was smaller than the massive station, but something about it made the Veltar watch nervously through their windows. Captain Yoonji Han stood on her ship's bridge, studying the data flowing across her screens. Her crew worked quietly around her, but she could feel their tension. The numbers they were seeing were bad, very bad. "Captain," her science officer reported, "the station's power systems are unstable. I'm reading fluctuations in 17 different sectors. Atmospheric problems too," added another officer. "Multiple life support failures across the station." Captain Han's eyes narrowed as she read the most dangerous reading of all. "The reactor," she said quietly. "It's destabilizing. How long do they have?" "At current rate of decay, maybe 18 hours, before total failure," the science officer replied. Grimly. Captain Han had seen reactor failures before. When a station's main power source exploded, it took everything with it. Ships, people, entire sections of space became nothing but glowing dust. Kethver Station housed 50,000 beings from dozens of different worlds. If that reactor went critical, they would all die. "Open a channel to the station," she commanded. "I want to talk to whoever is in charge." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Captain Han was looking at the face of Station Commander Yitak. The Veltar leader had scales that changed color with his emotions, and right now they showed irritation and anger. His large eyes glared at her through the screen. "Captain Han," Yitak began before she could speak, "your people are criminals who sabotaged our station. They will face justice for their crimes." Captain Han's voice became as cold as space itself. "Commander, are you aware that your reactor is approaching critical failure?" The scales on Yithik's face flickered with uncertainty. "That's impossible. Our engineers checked everything. They assured me that all systems are stable." "Your engineers are wrong," Captain Han replied calmly. She pressed a button on her command chair, and detailed sensor readings appeared on both screens. The data showed power curves falling like cliffs, temperature readings climbing into the danger zone, and pressure measurements that made even the Veltar commander's eyes widen. "You have less than 18 hours before cascade failure, Captain," Han continued. "When that reactor explodes, it will take your entire station with it. 50,000 people will die." Yithok stared at the data, his confidence cracking like thin ice. "But our best engineers said ... they promised me." Before he could finish, the command center doors burst open behind him. Station engineer rushed in, his usually calm manner completely gone. His breathing was rapid, and his hands shook as he approached the commander. "Sir," Vexmar gasped. "Emergency in the reactor core. The containment field is destabilizing. My teams cannot find the problem." On the screen, Captain Han's expression did not change. But now she spoke with the patience of a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "I can tell you exactly what the problem is, Commander. That reactor uses safety protocols designed by human engineers. Protocols that your people clearly do not understand." She leaned forward in her chair, her eyes boring into Yithok's through the screen. Ji-Ho Park, Min-Soo Kim, and So-Young Lee spent months learning how to maintain the delicate balance that reactor requires. They understood how every system connected to every other system. They could feel when something was wrong before your machines even detected it. Vexmar stepped closer to the screen, his face filled with desperate hope. "Captain, can your people really fix this?" "Of course they can," Captain Han replied. "But first, Commander Yithik needs to release them from prison." Yithik's scales flushed dark purple with pride and anger. "We don't need human help. The Veltar are superior engineers. We built this station." Captain Han's smile was thin and cold. "Commander, let me explain something to you. Your pride is about to kill 50,000 innocent people. That reactor will explode in less than 18 hours. When it does, you can tell yourself how superior you are as you float in space as glowing atoms." The command center around Yithik filled with the sound of alarms. More warning lights appeared on every screen. The station's automated systems began announcing emergency procedures. Through the viewports, they could see ships beginning to undock, trying to escape before the disaster struck. "But I'll make you a simple deal," Captain Han continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "Release Ji-Ho Park, Min-Soo Kim, and So-Young Lee right now. Let them do their jobs, and they will save every single life on that station." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Or you can continue this pride-driven foolishness. You can keep them locked up while your reactor explodes, and when it's over, you can explain to 50,000 families why their loved ones died because you were too proud to admit you were wrong." The command center fell completely silent except for the steady beeping of system alerts. Every Veltar in the room stared at their commander, waiting for his decision. Outside, more ships fled the station, their engines glowing as they raced away from the coming disaster. Yithik looked at the data on his screens, then at the frightened faces of his crew, then back at Captain Han's unwavering gaze. The choice was simple, but his pride made it feel impossible. Commander Yithik stood in his command center, watching the red warning lights flash across every screen. The numbers kept getting worse, and the alarms kept getting louder. His pride felt like a heavy stone in his chest, but the fear of 50,000 deaths was heavier. His scales shifted from purple to gray as he looked at his officers. Some of them had families on the station. Others had worked here for years, building their lives in what they thought was safety. All of them were looking at him, waiting for him to make the choice that would save or doom them all. "Release the humans," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir?" asked his security chief, not sure he had heard correctly. "Release the human engineers," Yathok repeated, louder this time. "Bring them to the engineering section immediately. But they work under our supervision. I want our people watching everything they do." 20 minutes later, the heavy prison doors opened with a loud clang. Jiho, Minsu, and Soyoung walked out, blinking in the bright lights of the corridor. Their clothes were wrinkled from sleeping on hard prison beds, and they looked tired, but their eyes were alert and focused. "This way," said the Velter guard, his voice less harsh than before. "The commander wants you in engineering." As they walked through the station's corridors, the three humans could see the chaos around them. Maintenance crews ran between emergency calls. Families carried bags, preparing to evacuate if the reactor exploded. The air itself felt different, thinner, and more stale than usual. "How bad is it?" Jiho asked the guard. "Bad," the guard replied. Simply, "Our engineers cannot fix what is broken." When they reached the engineering section, they found it packed with Veltar technicians and officers. Everyone stepped aside as the humans entered, creating a path to the main control stations. The screens showed a disaster in progress, systems failing one after another. Like dominoes falling in a line, Soyoung walked to the main diagnostic panel and began reading the data. Her expression grew more serious with each screen she checked. "Oh no," she said softly. "You tried to fix the power coupling failure." "Of course we did," Vexmar replied defensively. "That was the logical response. But you overcorrected," Soyoung continued, her fingers flying over the controls as she traced the cascade of problems. "When the original coupling failed, you boosted power in 17 different subsystems to compensate. Each boost created new imbalances. Those imbalances forced other systems to work harder. Now everything is fighting against everything else." Minsu was already opening a control panel that most Veltar engineers never touched. His hands moved, quickly and confidently, disconnecting cables and rerouting connections in ways that looked completely random to the watching aliens. "What are you doing?" demanded one of the Veltar supervisors. "Those connections are not supposed to be changed. The reactor is not just a power source," Minsu explained, without stopping his work. "It's the heart of a living system. Everything talks to everything else, but not through the official channels in your manuals. There are hidden pathways, backup connections, and emergency routes that only show up when the system is stressed." Vexmar moved closer, fascination overcoming his worry. "How is that possible? We built this station. We know every circuit and every cable." "You built it according to plans," Jiho said, now working on a different panel across the room. "But once it started running, it grew and adapted. Systems found new ways to connect. Power flows created their own paths. Your station became more than what you designed." He looked up at the watching Veltar engineers, his hands never stopping their work. "Your engineering is logical and precise, and that's good. But sometimes systems develop their own personalities. You have to feel what they need, not just calculate what the manual says they should need." The humans worked with a coordination that amazed their observers. Soyoung stood at the central control station, watching dozens of screens at once. She would call out instructions to her teammates, who were working on systems in different parts of the engineering section. Somehow, she kept track of how every change affected the whole station. "Increase the flow to section 12, she called to Minsu. "Doing it now," he replied, making adjustments that immediately showed results on her screens. "Jiho, the environmental system in Sector 7 needs attention," she continued. "Already on it," Jiho answered from across the room, his hands deepened. "Another control panel. Junior engineer." Kolseth watched in amazement as the humans seemed to break every rule of system integration he had ever learned. "This is impossible," he whispered to a colleague. "They are connecting systems that should never be connected." They are sending power through pathways that should not exist. No, Vexmar said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. They are not breaking rules. They are following rules that we never knew existed. Rules that the station itself created over time. Hour by hour, the humans worked their way through the cascade of failures. Systems that had been red and critical slowly shifted to yellow warnings, then to green normal operations. The reactor's temperature began dropping. The pressure readings started stabilizing. The power flows smoothed out like a rough sea, becoming calm. The Veltar engineers watched in speechless amazement as their station came back to life under human hands that seemed to understand it better than they did themselves. The clock on the engineering section wall showed 43 minutes remaining until the projected reactor explosion. Everyone in the room held their breath as So-young made final adjustments to the main control console. Her fingers moved carefully across the panel, making tiny changes that somehow affected systems throughout the entire station. The screens around her showed numbers climbing back to normal levels. Power flows that had been chaotic and dangerous were now smooth and steady. Temperature readings dropped from the red danger zone into safe yellow numbers. Most importantly, the reactor core readings stabilized for the first time in hours. So-young straightened up slowly, her back aching from hours of bent-over work. She looked at the main display one more time, checking every system twice, to be sure. Then she turned to face the room full of watching Veltar engineers. "Reactor stable," she announced, her voice calm but tired. "All primary systems are working. Normally, the secondary systems will need another hour of work, but the crisis is over. No one is going to die today." The engineering section exploded in cheers. Veltar technicians who had been silent and worried for hours suddenly began clicking their mandibles in joy. Some of them hugged each other. Others called their families to share the good news. A few simply sat down in relief, their legs too weak to hold them up anymore. At that moment, Commander Yithik rushed into the engineering section. He had been watching from his command center, but he needed to see the results with his own eyes. The screens around him confirmed what So-young had said. Every major system showed green lights. The station was safe. Yithik looked at the three human engineers who had just saved 50,000 lives. Jiho was still working on a secondary system panel, making sure everything was perfect. Minsu was cleaning up his tools and putting them back in order. So-young stood by the main console, watching the final numbers settle into safe ranges. Double quotes Yithik began, then stopped. The words he needed to say were difficult for a proud Veltar commander to speak. "I owe you an apology. All of you. What I did was wrong. I let my pride and fear make me stupid." He turned specifically to the three humans. "And I owe these three engineers my deepest gratitude. You saved every life on this station, even after we treated you like criminals." Captain Han's voice suddenly came through the communication system, clear and strong. "Commander, I trust you will be treating our people with appropriate respect from now on." Yithok looked up at the nearest speaker, knowing that the human captain could see him through the station's cameras. "More than respect, Captain Han. I am offering them positions as chief engineers, with full authority over all station maintenance protocols. They will have the power to make any decisions they think are necessary." On the main screen in the command center, Captain Han's image appeared. Her expression was still serious, but some of the anger had left her eyes. "I should mention something, Commander. This entire incident has been broadcast across subspace communication networks. Every major species in known space now knows what happens when you imprison human engineers." She paused to let that information sink in. "Earth is implementing a new policy. Our technical specialists will only work in places where they are valued as essential partners, not treated like disposable workers." The implications of this hit Yithik immediately. If Earth stopped sending human engineers to alien facilities, dozens of stations and colonies would face serious problems. Human technical skills had become more important than most species wanted to admit. "I understand," Yithak replied quietly, "and I accept full responsibility for my mistakes." The next day brought changes throughout the station. Security Chief Gorth, who had ordered the arrest of the human engineers, found himself reassigned to waste reclamation duties in the lowest levels of the station. It was dirty, smelly work that would give him plenty of time to think about his poor decisions. Vex Mar, meanwhile, did something no Veltar had ever done before. He submitted an application to Earth's engineering exchange program. He wanted to learn from human teachers, to understand how they thought about machines and systems. His application became the first of many, as word spread about what the humans had accomplished. Ho, Minsu, and Soyoung were offered new quarters in the station's best residential section. They were also given offices in the command center, where important decisions were made. Most importantly, their recommendations now carried the weight of law. When they said a system needed attention, it got attention immediately. But the biggest change was in how the other workers treated them. Before, many aliens had seen them as useful, but inferior mechanics. Now, everyone on the station understood that these three humans were the reason they were all still alive. As Captain Han's ship prepared to leave Kethver Station, she sent one final message. Her words were broadcast not just to the station, but to monitoring posts throughout the sector. "Remember this lesson, Commander Yithak. Humans don't just fix your machines. We make them better than you ever imagined possible. We see connections that others miss. We solve problems that others cannot even understand. Treat us accordingly." The message was received and understood. More importantly, it was transmitted to every corner of known space. Soon, every alien species would know that human engineers were not just skilled workers, but essential partners in keeping civilization running. The three humans watched Captain Han's ship disappear into hyperspace, then returned to their work. But now they worked as respected professionals, not hidden mechanics. The station hummed around them, systems running smoothly under their expert care.